Hi guys, and welcome to another session of Honest Talk About Women, where you'll learn tips, tricks and strategies on how to navigate the minefields of dating and relationships. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and also comment in the comment section. It all helps with the YouTube algorithm. So let's get right into it. This is about my second marriage, and this is for men out there that are contemplating marriage, the possible challenges that you might be up against, and the opportunities. And also, if you get something out of it, then I've helped you. That's good. So there's too many YouTubers that give advice on marriage when they've never been married or they've never had kids. So it makes me wonder how valuable their advice is. So I've had life experiences, I've had 2 marriages, and I've got a story to tell. So let's get on to my second marriage. I'd finished my first marriage in 2015, and I was dating again. And dating was like when I've dated before, 99.9% of the people were a no-go. They were a swipe left. I just didn't do online dating. I also got out and met people. So how did I meet my second wife? I went to a bar. It was lunchtime. There was some mutual friends who invited us over to have some drinks. They were at a birthday party, and I looked at the couple that were celebrating their birthday, a guy and a woman. And the woman was very attractive, and I just locked onto her back. She had her back to me. And all of a sudden she just turned around, and there's this lovely smile that radiated. And I smiled back at her, and we just looked in each other's eyes for about 5 or 7 seconds. And we've always said that to each other during our marriage about that special occasion. But she was married. She was not married. She was seeing another guy, and it was his birthday, and she was off limits. I couldn't go for it at all. However, about a month later, I was at a party, and she happened to be at the party, and we got dancing, and we got talking, and we hit it off, and we became an item. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend, and apparently when he was back in town and heard of us being an item, he got very angry and said, who is this guy Scott? And I never want to see this guy Scott in town when I'm in town. So I found that very interesting. So I took it with a grain of salt. We dated for about 6 months. And during that time, we decided to go on a cruise ship, one of our first away trips. And you always get to know a bit more about a person when you go on a trip with them, what they're like. So it was the biggest emotional roller coaster I've ever been on. We broke up 3 times on that boat, and every time we broke up, we had mad, passionate sex afterwards. So it was an emotional roller coaster, and that should have been a red flag at the start. But I was naive. I was green behind my ears, and she seemed like a good woman. She had 2 boys, 8 and 11, and I had 2 girls, 7 and 10. I knew nothing about single mums or kids or blended families. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was just blind walking myself into this. And I just come out of a previous marriage, and I thought I'd learned a few things, but I naively went into a new relationship straight away. So I remember one night we're at a Chinese restaurant with her parents, and she pulled me aside and she said, Scott, I want you to ask my father if you can marry me. And it caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it at all, but I did ask the father, and he did agree. So around this time, I wanted to implement an ironclad prenup agreement, because the previous relationship I went in with 8x to her 1x of assets. And I didn't want to compromise on the asset split should that occur down the track. So I got an ironclad prenup signed up, and we got married at a 5-star hotel in Auckland. And it was a lovely honeymoon. We went to Bali. It was my first time to Bali, and it was just truly eye-opening. It was absolutely beautiful. You couldn't ask for a better wedding and a better honeymoon. It was right up there, the same as or even better than my first marriage. So off to a good start. And it was interesting because at the wedding, a couple of mutual friends came up to me during the night, and one stated, "Are you aware that she takes sleeping pills and drinks alcohol?" And a second guy came up to me and said, "Are you aware that Asian women have wicked tempers?" He was married to an Asian lady. And I thought to myself, what is this, confession night? These people coming up and telling me this? I found that very amusing. So the wedding was well executed. We took some lovely photos. We went to a local park. It was busy traffic in the city, and a lot of people were coming up and said we looked beautiful, and the sun was shining. We looked just radiant. It was a lovely day. So things went well during the early phases of the marriage. She had an absolute burning desire for me. She was very passionate, very, very passionate about me. She did have different sleep patterns to me. I'm always asleep at 10, wake up at 6, and she never had a regular sleep pattern. And yes, she did take sleeping pills and the occasional alcohol. She suffered insomnia. She was just all over the place with her sleeping. And mood swings did occur. They were more frequent as the time went on. And she gave me the cold shoulder on certain times over trivial things. I remember once we went on a trip, again, to Bali. And we went to this beautiful 5-star hotel. Absolutely stunning. Completely different world. And she wanted me to take photos of her by the pool for Instagram. And I'm not a photographer. And she insisted that I take photos, and they need to be correct. You need to have the right body angle, the right sunlight, and so forth and so forth. After about 100 shots, I just gave up and said, look, this is not for me. And she looked at the photos and said, this is terrible, Scott. This is... you haven't taken any put any effort into it at all. Basically, she wanted the photos for Instagram, so she got validation on her social websites from her B and C grade guys that used to chip in with their comments. And I just wasn't into that. This is not my thing. It doesn't come into my world. It came into her world at the time. And you can just imagine how that trip went to that very expensive 5-star hotel. There's no nookie on that trip. But she was also going through menopause, and she was having hot and cold flushes and mood swings. And she was very, very good at selling, but she was not a natural at managing staff or nurturing staff or disciplining staff. That wasn't her thing, managing staff. And she was getting advice from many different angles on how to run a business. And some of them were incorrect and some of them were conflicting. So one weekend, her website went down, and it's the first time I've ever seen someone have an anxiety attack. And she was panicking. She was absolutely panicking about her website being down. And the thing about it, she wasn't selling anything on a website. She didn't have an online business where people brought widgets or gadgets. It was just a website outlining who she is and her experience. And this is the first time I saw her have an anxiety panic attack. It was quite scary. And she got the website sorted out on Monday when the person was back at work. So as the kids got older, so did their stubbornness and aggressiveness. And there were times when we both found it challenging to manage and interact with the kids. The challenges of blending in a family are really tough. And if I'd done a bit of research on this beforehand, I would not have done it, because blending families is pretty much almost impossible. There's about a 90% failure rate with blended families, and it often comes down to the kids, people wanting them to do the way they want to do things, and they've been trained up in a different way. So it was off to a tough challenge, but we did do well at certain benchmarks. But often I used to get pushback from her kids. You're not my father, so don't tell me what to fucking do. And it was over trivial things like picking up the bag off the floor so someone wouldn't trip over it. So it was tough. Blended families are tough, and I would not recommend them to anyone. So occasionally she would go into fits and rages, slamming doors and shouting, and sometimes disciplining her boys. And I felt that very unnerving. One thing I don't like is people slamming doors and shouting. It's just not me. And it infuriates me. I just walk away. So her father also put a pressure on her to do a lot of the donkey admin work in his business. He preferred his son over his daughter to take over his business, and it really grated on her. So there's all these business pressures adding to a perfect storm accumulating. And she also had a business partner who was very intense, very tiresome to deal with. He used to ring about 8 p.m. at night, which was 11 p.m. our time, and the conversations went about 3 or 4 hours. He was a very good analyst in his industry, in the specific industry, FMCG, which is fast-moving consumer goods. But he had a protracted and long-winded way of talking, and it used to not only infuriate me, the amount of time she was spent on the phone, but also it used to infuriate her also. She also had an accountant that was similar to her business partner that had very protracted and long-winded conversations when simple business solutions were needed. And I could sense things were getting on top of her. She was not her usual self. So she eventually decided to employ a general manager and pay him top dollar. We're talking a lot of money, good money for what he was employed to do. But I remember one Easter time, I wasn't too sure whether it was 2019, 2020, not too sure, but or earlier, the newly appointed GM invited us over to his house to meet his wife and have some scones and jam and cream. Is very English. I used to muse at it. But that Easter weekend, my wife spent the whole Easter weekend working, doing all the administration. And when we went over to the new GM's place, I just thought to myself, who's working for who? Is my wife working for the new GM, or is the GM going to be working for her? I just thought it was in reverse. And at the same time, there are other pressures mounting in the business. There are a few lawsuits from ex-employees who thought they'd been disadvantaged, and there was also a tenant in one of her rental properties suing her, and this all added to the stress. I managed to convince her to sell the business, as the juice simply wasn't worth the squeeze. One client was keen to purchase the business because it had a ready-made army of sales reps from top to bottom of the country, and it would have been an easy bolt-on for that business. But that sale fell over, so I told her to list with an agency, and a seller came along at a lower price, but it was enough to clear debt and have a little bit left over. And I helped her through navigating the complexities of selling a business, because there's a lot to do. You got to prepare a huge amount of information. You've got to put all the information into like a business information memorandum. You've got to have tax returns signed off by a licensed accountant, and so forth and so forth. So we got to the end, and we sold the biggest division of her business. So she was keen to walk away and just let it go. She'd just had enough. But we got it over the line, and we sold that part of her business that took a huge amount of her time. So at the same time as this all was going on, it was just a big pot of stress. She started to have a disagreement with my eldest daughter, who was going through adolescence and becoming quite stubborn, opinionated, and inflexible. And those that have kids know what I'm talking about. For those that haven't had kids go through phases, and when they get to teenagers, they go through puberty, they go through adolescence. It's a stage where they become more assertive, opinionated, and argumentative. So there's various ways to handle that, and it didn't work well with my wife at the time. So my eldest daughter had the option of sleeping in the car in a park or staying at my house, and I said to her, I don't want her sleeping in the car. It's way too dangerous. You're going to stay at my house, and I'll handle that with my wife at the time. And I told my wife, let me handle it. But obviously that absolutely infuriated my wife at the time, and she was adamant that was not going to happen. So one night she was returning home from overseas. My wife arrived home, and she just went ballistic. She went around smashing things throughout the house. She picked up all the pictures off the walls and just smashed them onto the floor. The glass went everywhere, the frames are broken, and then she got the actual picture itself and just ripped it to bits. And I could hear all this going on, And I told my daughter previously to stay in a room, lock her door, I'll handle it with my wife, just keep out of the way. And my eldest daughter did stay in a room and kept out of the way. But my wife was like a raging bull, and I wasn't sleeping in the same room as her. I just wanted to give her space, give her distance, and let her blow some steam. And I thought, she can blow some steam and then she'll go back to sleep, and we'll pick it up in the morning and when she's had some sleep and sort it out. However, my youngest daughter decided to have a shower, and she came across in the wrong place at the wrong time. She basically came out of her room, went to the bathroom, saw that all the toiletries had disappeared. She checked the bin in the kitchen. It was empty. She decided to check the bin outside. She found her toiletries. She brought them back in, and she came in the path of a raging bull. And there was a physical altercation that occurred. So if you've ever heard two cats fighting that night, that's what it was like, that sound. And I immediately had to break up the fight, and basically told my wife on the spot that the boundaries of reasonableness have been crossed and that our marriage is over. Every guy has a duty to provide and protect for their children, and that's an unwritten rule. I'm pretty sure it may be somewhere in the Bible or somewhere out there, but it's an unwritten rule to me that your number one duty is to provide, meaning put clothes on their back and put food in their stomach, and also to protect, because there's a lot of evil out there and you need to protect your kids from evil. And I was just fulfilling my gut instinct of protecting my youngest daughter at the time. And she put me in a very difficult position, having to make a decision on the spot. It was an unfortunate incident that occurred, but it is what it is, and it happened. So what do I learn from this? What do I get out of this? So post-divorce audit. This woman should have been the wife to the end. She was deep down, without business stress, without the issues of managing kids. She's actually a decent sort of woman, but because of the accumulation of stress and a lot of things happening in her life, she went ballistic, and there was unfortunately a physical altercation with my youngest daughter, and it could have been a very serious incident because there was glass on the floor, and all they're all taken is for one of them to fall down onto that broken glass, and it could have cut a artery, and it could have been blood everywhere, and you could be dead within a very short period of time. So very fortunate there was no serious injuries. How could I have de-stressed the situation? I constantly think about that. How could I have de-stressed the situation? And my oldest daughter was going to sleep in the car in a park, and that was just way too risky. There's too many weirdos at night lurking around. So I told her to stay in her bedroom and keep out of the way, and I'll handle it with my wife. My wife was also very wound up. She was in a highly pressurized situation. She was going through menopause. It was just all the elements of a perfect storm. She also had a very demanding, talkative business partner. She had a muddled accountant, a father that preferred a brother to take over the business. She had business clients that dropped to her. She was in a very tough industry. It's not an industry that I'd recommend people to go into. It's a duopoly in New Zealand. It's tightly managed by two supermarket giants that continuously screw down the costs. So it's like raking water uphill. She was in an impossible situation, in an impossible industry to make headway. It's a hard grind, hard grind. So she also had lawsuits from ex-employees and a tenant that was suing her. It was just, all the wheels are coming off, and she was taking that on her shoulders, and it triggered her, my eldest daughter staying at home, into a full-blown rage. But it was what it is, and we can't undo what happened, and it's very unfortunate what did happen, and I forgive her as a person. She's a product of her upbringing, and she had certain character flaws, and people are not perfect. Everyone's got certain character flaws that happened in their childhood, and she was accustomed to a environment when she was brought up that was completely different to what she was in the last 2 to 3 years of our marriage. So she was in a highly pressurized environment, and she didn't cope that well at all. So in certain environments, with the right pressures added, people can act out of character, and it can happen to all of us. But most people go through life that never experience this, but there are times when you can be in a certain situation where it encourages you to act out of character. And she was not accustomed to the roller coaster ride of the business pressures. So also blended families, I would not encourage anyone to do blended families. When you're dating, there's a lot of single mums with kids on dating websites, and also at other non-dating activities where they're looking for a guy. I would not recommend a blended family at all. The success rate is only about 10%. That means a 90% failure rate. The biggest problem is when you have kids that go through adolescence. They change, they can get aggressive, especially boys. Some of them develop quite a strong sex drive, and pornography is quite available out there. And when boys are looking at pornography, thinking that it's quite normal to see a stepbrother do a stepsister, their target can target some non-blood members in the current house. So there's an inherent danger there in blended families when you've got both boys and girls. It didn't happen in this case. We're absolutely fine. But I'm just saying that to those guys out there who are looking at blended family possibilities. Make your eyes wide open, guys. Post-separation, she appears to have disentangled herself from her business partner and a business practice, which is a major relief for her. And her kids, who are 18 plus, now live in Auckland, and she's moved to another town with her new boyfriend. And on the note of her new boyfriend, he was a loosely connected friend of mine for about 30 years. I used to call him Ferrari Man because he made a bit of money. He was in the right place at the right time in the right industry, and he had a product that sold well, and he did well. And he developed a great business brain, so I give him full credit for that. He's a businessman. But when I went out with him as a wingman, his opening line was, "My name is X, and I own a Ferrari." And that is the worst pickup line you could ever have. You end up attracting the wrong type of girl who's attracted to your material assets than the girl who you want who's not materialistic. So I called him Ferrari Man, and he's been single all his life. In fact, that's not true. I actually set him up about 25 years ago with a well-educated, polished farm girl, and that was his first live-in relationship, and that lasted about 30 seconds. That ended in disaster. So he's got the ability to change and learn, so I wish them both on their new journey. They're now living in a different part of New Zealand, so good luck to you guys. My next video will be on dating in your 50s and how the dating game's changed, and my experiences and successes to date. So do comment, guys. Do like it. Click on the like tab, and also Alpha Dating. You can get it off Amazon Kindle books for a very reasonable price, and it provides some brilliant red and green flags to look for when dating. So until next time, take care.